Hi, my name is Bob and welcome to the Homestead, y'all. Well, it's time for our 1 month update. Today is June 25th. So our tomato plants have been in the ground for 1 month today. We're gonna go ahead and measure them and see where we're at today. We've done a few things over the last month. I did have to water them one time. We ended up going 24 days without rain. I think we were in the 10-day mark whenever we planted them. So I did water them one time after we planted them, but that's it. I haven't watered them again. I cut off the first set of blooms that came on each plant. I cut them off, and I've been trimming the leaves back, trying to keep the bottom 18 inches or so clean on these. We don't want any leaves on the first 18 inches to 2 feet of the plants. So we want to keep those leaves cut back. Other than that, I've just been coming out here every day and pulling the plants in. You can see this one's trying to stick out. They've been growing so fast. Literally, I've been having to come out every day and pull the plants back inside the cages. So we'll go ahead and measure these. I'll take you around, show you each plant, and give you a few tips and pointers on growing monster tomato plants. Some of the things that we do year after year. And like I said, by keeping the leaves cut is one of them. Another thing that we do is we make sure that they have at least an inch of water a week. So if we don't get an inch of rain, then we water them. Okay, now once these plants get on up a lot larger, then they're going to need at least 2 inches of rain a week. And then by the end of the summer, they're going to need the equivalent of about 3 inches of rain, because they're going to be up there about 12 to 14 feet tall. They're going to be loaded with tomatoes, and it takes a lot of work to keep that plant cool, and it takes a lot of work, water to produce the tomatoes. Okay, so let me go ahead and measure these real quick, and then I'll take you around and show you each plant. Now this plant here is right at 50 inches. This plant's at 53 inches. This one's only at 36 inches. And this poor little plant over here hasn't grown hardly any. I'm gonna show you that here in just a minute, and I'm gonna tell you what I think is the problem. I'm not positive, but I planted another plant beside it about a week ago, I guess, and because you only get one shot at growing monster tomato plants. I mean, by the time we get this far into the year, there's not enough time before first frost to get these plants all the way up to 16 feet. So I went ahead and planted another plant in there. It probably won't make it 16, but it'll probably make it to 12 or 13 feet, and it'll still produce a bunch of tomatoes for us. And that's our goal, is to produce plenty of tomatoes. As I take you around, you'll see these plants are loaded with blooms, so it's not going to be too terribly long, and we're going to have tomatoes off these plants. And then we'll get tomatoes all the way to first frost. So I'll grab the camera and I'll show you each plant. Okay, this is our first plant. You can see we have the leaves cut off almost 18 inches. This leaf right here could probably be pinched off. The reason we pinch those leaves off is because we do not want any bacteria from the rain hitting the soil and splattering back up onto our leaves, and then it's going to send a bacteria spot all the way up our plant. So by keeping the bottom 18 inches to 2 foot clear, that helps with that. Now another thing we do when we water these plants, we never water the leaves. Do not water the leaves. You don't want to get any water on your tomato plant leaves. Now sometimes, yes, it rains at night, and there's nothing you can do about that except for come out here in the morning and shake the plant and get the water off the leaves as quick as possible, because when that water sits there, that's where you'll get bacteria spot on your tomato plants, and you'll get disease, and that's one thing you definitely don't want. But this plant here, this is a 3 foot plant. It's growing okay. This one doesn't grow quite as good. I don't know if you can tell on camera, but there's a shadow right here. We have an oak tree here, and this plant doesn't get as much sun all day long. It'll be shaded for about 2 hours a day. So this one does not grow quite as good as these back two, and I'm going to show you these. This one and this one over here, every year they don't grow quite as good. As that oak tree gets bigger, it gives them a little more shade. and they don't grow as good. But I'm going to trim this oak tree back this fall to where maybe next year we'll get sunlight on these, because to grow monster tomato plants, to grow big tomato plants with lots of tomatoes, you need sun from the time the sun comes up to the time the sun goes down. That's when you're going to grow your biggest plants, your best tomatoes, is getting full sun from daylight to dark. Okay, here's plant number 2. And like I said before, he's 50 inches for us. This plant is doing wonderful. Now this plant gets sunlight from the time the sun comes up to the time the sun goes down. So it always grows good. The plants that we plant in this one and this one behind me, we'll look at it in just a second. But this plant's doing wonderful. It's doing great. I have the leaves trimmed back about 18 inches. There's one there. It's sticking down a little further than I like. As this plant gets bigger, I'll keep the leaves, I'll keep trimming them up further and further, because it's going to start producing tomatoes. You can see down here on the bottom, it starts producing tomatoes at the bottom first and then works its way up. So as these tomatoes get ripe, I'll be clearing the leaves out from them so that way they'll ripen better. And there's a limb I need to get inside there. And then I'll just keep coming out here every day and keep pulling these limbs back inside the cage, because there's going to be plenty of them that get outside the cage once this plant gets bigger that I can't reach every day. And I want to keep as many of them down here this low inside the cage as I can. All right, let's look at this other one. The bottom 18 inches of this plant is clear of leaves, but it's curving. And I think it's curving because there's so much weight already on this stem. The stem didn't have time to get big enough for as quick as this plant has grown. Over the last month, this thing has just took off. Literally every day, these limbs, I've got to come in here and pull them out. There's one I've missed. We'll turn him, put him inside. But this thing's been growing so fast, you can almost sit here and watch it grow, which is really nice. But it's pushing 60 inches now, so I would say by next month's update, by the time we do a 2-month update, this plant's going to be close to 8 or 9 feet tall. So we'll just keep letting it grow, and we'll make sure that it has plenty of water. I did put leaves down this year, so that's going to help retain a lot of moisture. The only disadvantage to putting leaves down like this is if we have a week-long rain event to where we have too much moisture in the soil, then I may have to bring a rake out here and rake these leaves back a little bit and let some of that water evaporate just so we don't get root rot. But other than that, the leaves are a great addition. They're going to help hold the moisture in. So hopefully these plants have everything they need to be as big as they can be to reach their full potential. Now let's look at this last one back here, and we're going to talk about why it hasn't grown, or why I think it hasn't grown. Okay, here's our last plant, and it was the smallest one. It was in the little 4-cup containers whenever we planted it. And when I planted this plant, I just put 5 gallons of water, let it soak in right here, so everything was soaking wet. And I planted this plant in here, and it hasn't grown hardly any. You can see how tiny it is. It's still only 4 inches tall or so. So it really hasn't grown any. It hasn't died, but it really hasn't grown any. So last week I came in here and I had another one that was out of the exact same container as this one, and it had already grown this tall. So I planted this in here last week, and I'm hoping it'll take off. Of course, like I said, with this monster tomato grow, you only get 1 shot a year at it when you're growing outside. So we'll see what it does. I'm still going to leave this plant to see if it eventually takes off. Maybe it'll take off and just shoot up like a rocket. You never know. But that's our 1-month update. Of course, we'll do a 2-month update, and I'll tell you what I've done since then. By then, we should be picking tomatoes. Should already have a bunch of tomatoes off of these. In fact, I'd say by next week, we'll start getting tomatoes off of these front 2. But if you have any comments or questions about our monster tomato grow, or how we are able to grow plants 16 feet tall, please leave it in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.